let's talk. I want to say it was 15 years ago. I showed up at an event down in Steps, and I just set up camp, and I was walking toward the main hall, and I came across camp of a friend of mine, and she was sitting in a chair relaxing after setting up her camp. And as I walked up, I noticed she had a yellow belt on. I hadn't seen her in a while, and we greeted, we talked for a second. I looked down and I saw the yellow belt, and I go, congratulations, because of course, for those of you who don't know, a yellow belt means you are a protege, a student of the Pelican. And she said thank you, and we talked about who her Pelican was. And I said, so, Sispine, you've set your sights on becoming a Pelican someday? And she thought about that for a second, and she goes, really, I just kind of reached a point in my SCA career where I didn't want to think about what to do next, and I just needed someone to kind of think for me. And I thought about that for a second, and I chuckled, and I go, mundanely, I think they call that enlistment. And for the record, she got a kick out of the joke, and her spouse laughed at it, and it was a good chuckle. But it also highlights something that I really want to talk about, albeit briefly here. And that is, what does it actually mean to be a student? It is very easy to simply say, these are people who want to be peers or want to be whatever it is they're studented to. And that's not universally inaccurate. I would say it is arguable that the overwhelming majority of red belts in the SCA do in fact want to be knights. And I think it's pretty safe to say that a very large fraction of green belts do in fact aspire to become laurels. And this gets really kind of interesting because the Pelican, if you look at the Pelicans, at least in my kingdom, a large number of Pelicans, I don't know if it was a majority, but a not insubstantial number were not proteges when they were made. And a large number of the proteges I know openly say that the point of their protégeship is their relationship with this Pelican. They want the mentorship, they want the feedback, they want to grow, but they don't necessarily want or expect to wind up as a peer. And that is what I want to talk about here. A studentship of any type, whether it is man-at-arms, what we used to call provost for the rapier peerage for Master of Defense. I know we're getting away from provost now, so I have no idea what the studentship is called. For the Pelican, rather the protege to Pelican, the apprentice to laurel, the squire to knight. For us, the white scarf, the red scarf is the student to the white scarf, which is our our prestige order for the rapier community. These are all studentships. And yes, being a student is one of the ways to advance yourself to that rank. And it's a logical step, absolutely. But it is not the only reason to become a student. Now, why is that important to you? It's important to you, it's important to all of us for two reasons. Number one, it is important to you because It is one thing to understand that that person over there with a red belt is in fact squired to a knight. That's a statement of fact. A red belt means squire. Traditionally, it's not a protected insignia, but traditionally means squire to a knight. And that does make them, if they are squire to a knight, that does make them accountable and a student to and under the mentorship of an individual who's a member of the chivalry. But it's another thing to consider the possibility that, does this person want to be a knight, or is this a relationship that is being fostered for other reasons? And that's not a small deal, because if we assume that everyone who's a red belt wants to be a knight, it's very easy to make some very negative inferences about some squires. I know a number of people who have neither the physique nor the endurance nor the strength to be a knight and never will. They're old enough and they've started late enough that they will never be a knight. They know it, they say as much, they're very candid about it, but yet they're still a squire, and they were made a squire, grand scheme of things, relatively recently. They were not made a squire in their youth. So why were they made a squire? Understanding that that person took a squireship not out of pursuit of rank, but possibly or likely out of pursuit of self-betterment, in and out of armor, that says something about them. It says something about them different than just, oh, he's a squire, wants to be a knight. It's the same thing with a protege. If someone has a yellow belt on, yeah, it's you're not askew by assuming, okay, and for lack of other information, they probably want to be a protege or want to be a pelican. Or maybe someone they look up to, someone they respect who is a pelican, has agreed to mentor them more generally, not towards the end of becoming a peer, but just towards the ends of general betterment, or perhaps something more specific, perhaps officership within the SCA, mentoring them in that specifically, or project management in the SCA. Those are valid options. Understanding that not all students necessarily want to be the rank of their master or their teacher. That's an important thing to keep in mind, because it says something about the person. Now, the other reason, it can say the same thing about you. A lot of you are not students. And some of you assume, and based on the information you've probably been told, it's a safe deduction really, that you should not be a student because you don't want to be a peer, or you don't want to be this grant level rank, or this prestige rank. You don't want that title, so why should you take a studentship to someone of that position? And the fact of the matter is that you can, if that master has something that you want to learn. A studentship is a highly, highly individual, highly personal thing. And you can become a squire even if you're never going to be a knight. That's not the only purpose for a belt. The fact of the matter is that the red belt's purpose is to denote the studentship. Now, we assume the studentship means you want to be a knight, and that's a majority case, but it's not universal. You can take a red belt just to show people that you are willing to learn the motions of being a fighter. Even if you're never going to go anywhere with it, the fact that you're taking the time to learn, to listen to someone else, you want to formalize that relationship, and you want to tell the world that I have this student relationship. That in and of itself is good enough reason to take a red belt for a lot of people. Same thing with a green belt. You may know you are never going to become a laurel. You don't enter enough competitions, you don't do enough documentation, your art isn't good enough to compete at that level. You can objectively say that about yourself. You may be being too hard on yourself, but I know people where that is objectively true. That is not their focus. But they are still students. They still have a close student relationship with a Laurel because they still want to learn the craft. They still want to learn how to do some of these things. They also may want general personal growth. There is no peerage for good conduct. That's something that all peers are supposed to have and teach. And someone who recognizes that they may have some personal characteristics they need to work on, that may be why they've taken that studentship. It's a very real possibility. It's a very real possibility for you. Maybe you're a bad public speaker. Maybe officership scares the fire out of you. Maybe responsibility gives you an anxiety attack. Those are real examples from people I know, some of whom I count as close friends. You may want to change that. You may feel like that having the right teacher, having the right mentor can help you with that, can help you do more in the SCA. And for some people, having that formal relationship, having that reminder on their body, telling the world and holding them to the fact that they are a student, they are representing not only themselves but a peer, that can be a catalyst for good things. Yeah, it's like I told my friend, today we call that enlistment. And back then, we called it apprenticeship or squireship, protégeship. Don't ever cut yourself off from being a student just because you don't think you'll ever make that end goal, the implied end goal of that peerage or that rank or that title. Don't ever give up, period. But just because you're never going to be a knight doesn't mean you can't be a squire. Just because you don't think you'll ever be a Laurel doesn't mean you can't be an apprentice. Just because you know you don't do enough work or have enough travel to be a pelican doesn't mean you can't be a protege. Just because you're never going to be a rapier master doesn't mean you can't take the mantle of a master of defense. Take their student mantle, I should say. If you have someone who you want to formalize that relationship with, the only thing stopping you is you and them. And if you come to an agreement, you're a student or her student. Something to think about. Thank you for listening. I'll see you at the next event. Till then, goodbye and God bless.